evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Good evening to everyone on YouTube and here on live on a space that's being hosted by Point Five Creative Studios. Today we have Linda Masarira. I'm so happy because we're having a guest who's a woman today. Welcome, Linda. How are you?
Fine, thanks. And you, host. Thank you for hosting me this evening.
I'm so excited, so happy to have you here. Well, to jump straight into your story, we want you to first give us introduce yourself, give us your background, tell us how you started in the political, how you became a politician, and just tell us about you.
That's one of the most difficult questions that I have to face time and again speaking about myself. It sounds like munhu so. But anyway, my name is Linda Masarira. I was born on the 3rd of October 1982. I am a Zimbabwean politician, labor justice, and gender justice activist. I'm a Pan-Africanist at heart. I'm a human rights defender. And maybe I might also say I hate injustice with a passion. I'm a farmer. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a mentor to several young women. And I am passionate about humanity. My political journey was not born from ambition, but necessity. I started off as a trade unionist, advocating for the rights of railway workers in tech, because I'm a computer technician by profession, by the way. Most people don't know that. And I started my activism in the tech sector, where I was working as a computer technician for Great Face Computers and Systems Technology, and we're also facing a lot of labor injustice during that time in the early 2000s. And I actually lost about 2 jobs for organizing labor action against our employers. The peak of my trade union activism was at National Railways of Zimbabwe, where I led the first labor action post 2000 in 2011, 2012, and 2013, demanding for our salaries, demanding for labor justice. And thereafter, I became deeply involved in broader social justice struggles. After witnessing systemic exclusion, economic inequality, and gender based injustice firsthand, I realized that true change must be driven by those with the courage to confront power. I transitioned into mainstream politics with a mission to represent the voiceless and challenge the oppressive structures that keep our people in poverty. One of the other things that really pushed me into mainstream politics was the realization that since independence in 1980, there was no deliberate move to reform our governance system, to reform our legal systems, to reform maybe on the education system they tried, but it's not yet uhuru. But there are a lot of things that need reform in our country. Why do I speak like this? It's because most of the laws that we still use were created post in the pre-independence period, in the colonial era, and we are still using those laws 45 years after independence. And these laws are oppressive, suppressive, and repressive. And that is why it is important to have a movement that is rooted in reform and transformation. And that is what we've been trying to do as labor economists and African Democrats. And one of the other reasons why I became an enemy of most of those who are in the legal sector, because I'm one of the very few people under the sun who's against the Roman Dutch law, the Dutch Roman law, whatever they call it, because I believe that it does not stand for justice, it stands for the elite, and it does not bring forth justice for the poor and vulnerable in society. Sorry, excuse me, I've got a cough. So we've been trying to champion government system change with resistance, though, from both the mainstream opposition party and the ruling party, because they are so comfortable with the status quo. So it has not been easy to ground myself in the political economy in Zimbabwe, because I am trying to transform what most people have already conformed to and what they call as acceptable. But from my perspective, we do not have to accept everything that was left by the colonizer and say this is the way that we're going to do things. I think as people with their own brains, we are supposed to transform ourselves into having a governance system that represents our aspirations as Zimbabwean people, as native Zimbabweans, that gives back the power to the native Zimbabwean. It is unfortunate that the governance system that we use is not giving back power to the people, because it was created to oppress, it was created to suppress, it was created to repress. So, in as much as we want to speak about free, fair elections, we will never get them using the systems that we are using. We will never get that using the legal systems that were meant to devour, legal systems that are carnivorous in nature. So we've got these problems that are really deep seated in the system itself. And as long as we do not have many people who are speaking into transformation and a complete system overhaul of the system of governance that we use in Zimbabwe, the judiciary system, we are not doing justice to ourselves, or the change that we call for every day, the change that we aspire to see, will not be realized as long as we are still putting lipstick on frogs and thinking that it's an easy walk in the park for us to be able to transform Zimbabwe. Transforming Zimbabwe is just not a change of faces on who is leading the country or a change of political parties. It is actually rooted in a mindset shift. We need to shift mindsets. We need to decolonize the mindsets for us to be able to build the Zimbabwe that we want. That is just Linda in short for you. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. You're such a powerful speaker. I'm impressed. Wow, thank you for representing the women well. So, Linda, can you tell us about your movement from MDCT up to LEAD? Can you talk to us about how it was, the transition, what led to that?
I joined the MDC late 2000. I was still very young then. It was out of that realization that I needed to do something for my generation as well. I had grown up reading the newspaper that much, because that is how my father raised me. And I had an understanding of what the country was going through, and I didn't want to be left behind. So when I joined, we were still staying in Bindura, and it was still very unpopular and very dangerous to belong to an opposition party. So I also had my own challenges trying to fit in a very ZANU PF stronghold, until I eventually had to leave Bindura and go and live in Harare. So I was mainly in the youth wing and the ward structures, because I wanted to understand how politics evolves. But being in the ward structures, I also realized that you get oppressed at that level in intra-party politics. You hardly rise as long as you do not know anyone on the top. I was comfortable with that because I wanted to understand the dynamics of politics. I am not a fly-by-night politician like what most people think. I took my time to understand the intra-party politics of opposition politics in our country. And as much as it then became a struggle for me to rise through the structures of the MDC, because I'm an opinionated person, and opinionated people are not wanted anywhere near power, because they will confuse the status quo in political party dynamics. I struggled to even get to provincial level itself. Hence, the time I evolved from ward politics, I went straight into the women's wing, where there was a little bit of flexibility because most women are not as outspoken and opinionated as I was. But by the time I got there, I was already facing resistance from those who were in the standing committee because they thought that I wanted to talk too much, I wanted to express myself too much, and then the gagging started to come out. The moment they realize that you've got a talent and that you can speak out, that's when they start telling you that you cannot speak to the media. We only have designated people to speak to the media. You try and form a civic society organization, they'll elbow you out and make sure that you don't have a platform to speak. So I had to confine myself in the trade unionism and speak out from that angle where no one could silence me. Now, in 2008, I wanted to run as a counselor for the MDC team in Bulawayo because I was working for the NRZ then based in Bulawayo. And that's when I tested my first tribalism test because I was openly told by MDC team members in Bulawayo that they would not accept a Shona councillor and to run in Bulawayo. I had no problem with that. I openly campaigned for those who eventually won the primaries, and they won. But my biggest disappointment was after the 2008 elections, after the emotional investment we had done in those elections, and how we all thought we had won, and what I later learned, which I've always spoken about. Then I was working for the NRZ. I was a train manager, and we're going to Botswana, Francistown. That was the train that I usually used to work. And I remember it was after the results when the late Dr. Morgan Richard Changirai had passed on. I mean, had crossed the border. Sorry about that, to Botswana, and the moment we got to the border, the immigration from Botswana was actually laughing at me. You know, they were like, "You are the one who always says Changrai, Changrai. Your Changrai crossed this border with no shoes, but he was being escorted by military intelligence." I'm telling you the truth. My stomach sank. I got so angry because I didn't understand how my president then would be running away from the government that is persecuting him, but being escorted by military intelligence. It didn't make sense. But then for me, it started that inquisitive journey to try and understand what was happening. And can you allow me to cut this part here and have it as a story for another day? But that is when I realized how opposition politics was already compromised, yet some of us were dying, were fighting so hard and thinking that we were all on the same page. So that is when I started speaking out, started asking questions, and the label of me being a sellout started being sold because we were not allowed to question. That is why I've always spoken time and again that our MDC was always a direct replica of ZANU PF in terms of operation, in terms of authoritarianism, in terms of how intra-party politics was run. You're not supposed to ask questions. It's just supposed to fit in and follow whatever it was happening. So I took a chill pill. I went out of the structures and I started watching from the terraces. And 2013, I didn't even vote for any political party because I realized that the MDC had sold out, and when they went into power, they never even stood for the founding principles of the party, and they actually went into the GNU and started whining and dining with ZANU PF, just the very same way those who came from the Liberation War in 1980 got into power and started enjoying what the white people were enjoying and forgot to fulfill the aspirations of the liberation struggle. And these are the realities of what made me fall out of love with the MDCT. So after that, the renewal team came out. That was Tedai Biti, the Elton Mangomas, Lucia Renga, Jacob Mafume, the Mazores, and everyone. they were speaking my language. They had also realized what I had been speaking about. That is when I rejoined politics and we went into Congress. We formed the People's Democratic Party and I was in the standing committee. And we had made a pact that we're building the party for 2018 elections and that we're going to take it one step at a time and that we were not going back to converge with the MDCT. Fast forward 2016, the rhythm started changing. People wanted to go back and work with Dr. Morgan Richard Changirai. I asked what had changed. And then a lot of things were now being said left, right, and center. I resigned from the PDP. I'm a principled person. When I take a stand, I stand on what I believe in. That's when I started to plan for my campaign as an independent candidate. And then I realized again when I had started going on the ground that Zimbabweans do not vote for independent candidates. They do not understand the importance of independent candidates. And I was found in limbo in 2017 where I had to find myself a political home for me to be able to run into elections. But at that particular time, I had no political home. I had lost hope in the late Dr. Mugerisha Changirai. And these are my personal opinions and my personal feelings. And there was no way I was going to run under his ticket. And when I later learned that there was money that had been poured out to build an MDC alliance, which was then supposed to fight the party that Joyce Muchuru had formed, that's also another story for another day. That's when I started realizing the dirtiness and how screwed up our politics was until the late Dr. Morgan Richard Changirai passed on and Dr. Tokozani Kupe sent emissaries to me to engage so that I could join her because I had openly told Nelson Chamisa that I was not going to follow his politics because of the way he had assumed the presidency of the MDC. I thought that it was improper, it was un-African to take advantage of a funeral in a mourning crowd to rise to your aspirations. And I also condemned the violence that had happened at the funeral. And prior to that, we were actually very good friends with with Nelson Chamisa, and we're even planning on how to take over the MDC through an extraordinary Congress after Togosani Cooper had ascended in a rightful place as the vice president. But when we're discussing all this, he was busy discussing and having his own other agendas that were against that. So constitutionalism was not the order of the day. The constitution was not being followed. And I believe that for any political party to run successfully, we have to be able to follow the constitution because it is the one that guides the principles of the political party. And that did not happen. And that is the main reason why I never supported Nelson Chamisa, why I never went into his party, even though I had 100% chances that I was going to go into parliament just like that. But I decided to follow principle. I decided to follow what I believe in, which is constitutionalism. And when I then joined the MDCT, led by Dr. Tokosani Kupe, we went to Congress. I got the role of the national spokesperson, and I believe I was very good at my job, but my deputy was always on my neck. He was always scheming my downfall, of which to a certain extent, I think I believe he believed that he succeeded in pulling me down and getting me out of the MDCT because at one time I had gone to my ex-husband's rural home in Madziwa, and that's a very ZANU-PF stronghold, and the family was being threatened that they had an MDCT person at their homestead. So I personally took my ex-mother-in-law's Zambia and wrapped it on and just started doing the chores, wrapping it. I actually took a photo as a satire. I posted it on my status, on my WhatsApp status, and say, never in my lifetime did I think that I would rap as Zanupi of Zambia, but sometimes we have to do that to protect the people we love. The deputy spokesperson took that picture, spread it on social media, and said, we said it. Linda is ZANU PF and all that. Dr. Tokozani Kupi wanted to force me to resign from the party. I told her I was not going to resign because I've never been ZANU PF and I will never be ZANU PF. And there's nothing wrong in trying to protect your relatives in a ZANU PF stronghold or could end up being in danger because a high profile opposition person was in the area. So after that, they decided to fire me from the MDCT. They thought I was going to fight them, but I didn't. I converged with other like-minded people, especially those in the labor movement, who also felt that the labor aspect had diminished in the MDC. And then we formed the Labour Economists and African Democrats in 2019. And we're still growing slowly but surely. We're not in a hurry because there are a lot of things that need to be fixed in our beloved country, Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. That's a lot of important information that we get to learn about you. I would like to also take you back. I know you've taken us to 2018, but I would like to take you back to 2016 when you're talking about you when we were told that you were in jail for 80 days as a female politician. How was it like being in prison, incarcerated, because of your your demonstrations? And can you also tell us about the campaign for Bring Our Women Back from Kuwait that you spearheaded? Please share with us.
Okay. The Bring Back Our Girls from Kuwait was a campaign that I did when women were being trafficked to Kuwait and being used for sexploitation and other dirty things. And I realized that our government was taking a laissez-faire approach to this issue, yet these were Zimbabwean women that had to be saved by our government. So we started demonstrating about it, engaging the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we even engaged the Minister of Women Affairs then, until we had a round table, which then eventually repatriated the women from Kuwait. We did the same as well for those who were in Oman. So we did a series actually of repatriation processes for women that were being trafficked, that were being used as sex slaves in most Arab countries. And we're under the banner of Zimbabwe Women in Politics Alliance, which I am a founder and trustee member that fights for the rights of women across Zimbabwe and those in the diaspora. And it also functions to mentor women into understanding politics and the role that they should play and to engage actively in politics across the political divide. And then in 2016 as well, that is the year that we did the 21 days of occupation in Africa Unity Square in June, where we're staying in Africa Unity Square, demanding the late President Robert Mugabe to step down from power as he had failed Zimbabweans. It is unfortunate that during that time we were arrested and released. I think we went in 2016 alone. I think I was arrested more than 7 times. With the longest time I stayed in jail, that was the 89 days when I was arrested on the 4th of July, 2016, for apparently blocking roads and burning tires and everything else. Though, fast forward later on, I learned that I had actually been sold out by my own colleagues because I was the Tajamuka leader then. And then some of the people who were quite close to me wanted to take over Tajamuka and had to get me behind bars so that they would remain in charge of Tajamuka, running advocacy and making money using my name. Those are some of the dirty things that actually happen in activism and politics. And that is what divided what we now call the opposition today, because a lot of scheming was being done. A lot of people make money by getting people arrested and then running campaigns of free this, and that, free this, and that, calling for money, taking that money and begging that money. A lot of people actually made money with my name whilst I was in prison. And then later on, the Russians say, Linda does not appreciate, Linda does not do this. And I had to cleanse my name, my brother's name, because at one time he was also being accused of chowing money, which he never received. And these are some of the realities of what happens in the so-called opposition politics in Zimbabwe. It's a very carnivorous, it's got camps, it's got factions. The hate is real. That is why you see that the so-called opposition has failed to hold water, because the divisions are real. They are way beyond what you see on social media. People can actually kill each other and claim that ZANU-PF or CIO did it. That is the reality of opposition politics in Zimbabwe. And it's a shame that I have to speak about this. I know my good brother Kudamsa Siwa one day once told me that, Linda, we can't start speaking about these things now. We have to speak about them when we are in our 60s. And I think, why should we talk about these things when we are in our 60s? Why should we mislead people to voting into things that we know are not sustainable? So at the end of the day, I suffered in vain. I eventually went and protested again in prison because of the ill treatment. When I protested in prison, I was sent to the maximum prison, the male prison, in solitary confinement in a dingy cell where there was no sunlight, where I didn't know whether it was day or night, where I didn't eat until I went frail because I was on a hunger strike. I was afraid of eating. I was afraid of being poisoned. And by the time I left prison, I was very sick. I was in hospital for a very long time. And I went through all this in vain, because I later learned 3 years later that some of my own had actually snitched on me, and they would pay even the magistrate so that I do not get bail. That is how dirty our politics is. And for more information on this, you read it in my biography, because I'm actually writing a book about my political journey, my political life, and how my very own did the worst to me. The people I trusted, whoever I called brothers and sisters. So that is what I went through. But instead of being broken, I'll be sincere, I actually came out stronger. My resolve became stronger. I wanted to fight for justice, and I still fight for justice, despite the fact that most journalists in Zimbabwe are paid not to write anything about me, about the work that I do, and that there is an organized agenda against Linda Masarira, to the extent that some people even alter the algorithms on social media spaces so that my posts do not reach where they're supposed to reach. That is the reality of politics. But sometimes you just have to be smarter for you to survive. As a woman in politics, you have to work twice as much, thrice as much, 20 times as much. And at the end of the day, I will not tire. I'll keep on fighting, because that is the course I decided to traverse in my life. And I will not stop, regardless of the body shaming, name calling, skullduggery, tomfoolery, you name it. I'll fight on until we are somewhere into getting the Zimbabwe that we want, or until we achieve our agenda of transforming Zimbabwe.
Wow. We thank you for your bravery, for standing up for the people of Zimbabwe. We thank you for representing those that have got no voice to speak. I, I would like um to give you a chance to just um tell us about your party. Like, what is it that makes your party different from other parties, besides what is happening outside the political, what is happening outside what we see? Can you just tell people who are listening now about your party? What do you believe in? What governance system that you're promising the people? And just share about your party right now, LEAD.
Okay, thank you so much. Linda Economists and African Democrats was founded in April 2019, and it is a labor backed party. We are very passionate about labor issues. I am the founding president of Labour Economists and African Democrats, which is a revolutionary feminist transformation political party born out of the people's struggle. Lead is guided by Pan-Africanism, economic justice, labor rights, gender equality, and authentic African governance models. We defined our own ideology called African Social Democracy, and we've got a 178-page ideology document that speaks to who we are, our ideology, what we stand for, and what we will not compromise as Labour Economists and African Democrats. And that, I think, um, makes us very different from other opposition political parties in Zimbabwe who have been very ideologically inept or ideologically bankrupt per se. Because from my perspective, having a hashtag Mugabe must go as an ideology is the highest form of tomfoolery. And that can never build into an ideology. That is why we found most opposition parties have always been splitting. So our mission is to build a people-centered, labor-driven economy where every Zimbabwean, regardless of tribe, class, gender, or religion, has a fair chance at dignity and prosperity. We are building towards having an egalitarian society where every Zimbabwean lives free from fear or want. We believe in servant leadership, economic sovereignty, constitutionalism, and rebuilding institutions to serve the people and not the political elites. We also strongly believe in food sovereignty. We are at a stage in our lives where the food sector is in the hands of the Greeks in Zimbabwe, and they are owning the means of production in the food sector. They own the meat processing. They own the food that we consume on a daily basis. And where are we as native Zimbabweans? We are nowhere to be found. And that is a national security issue. And we are doing a lot of policy interventions and advocacy work towards that. We have been doing a lot of work as well in terms of ensuring quality education for all Zimbabweans. We even advocated for the reduction of ZIMSEC examination fees until government agreed to subsidize examination fees in all government schools. We did that as Labour Economists and African Democrats. We also stopped the access to sexual reproductive health to 12-year-olds, which was at the peak by the time we intervened, wrote a petition to Parliament and even to the then Minister of Health, the second Vice President, Mr. Chiwenga, challenging access to sexual reproductive health to 12-year-olds without the consent of the parent. And we successfully also managed to get that done. So we have done a lot of policy interventions as lead. I could go on and on about our accomplishments and what we are doing, but we stand and pause as an alternative party in Zimbabwe that is speaking to alternative solutions and alternative ways of doing politics in Zimbabwe, unlike many other political parties who are just focused on removing the incumbents. We also realize that um, there's a lot of work that needs to be done into building a nation. You cannot build where people are divided. That is why, on a daily basis, we speak about the need of unity in our diversity. The moment we unite as Zimbabwean people in our diversity, we will be able to eliminate most of the vices that are affecting our country, because we'll be able to speak out to the issues that are affecting us collectively as Zimbabweans without looking at which political party one is coming from. So, as Pan Africanists and defenders of the human rights in our country and in the context of Africa, we believe in our constitution. We believe in the national constitution. We exist and advance to defend and promote the fundamental rights of all Zimbabwean people. It is not easy because a lot of people think in a lot of diverse terms, but there are things that can unite us as Zimbabweans, that can help us build a nation, that can unite us so that we can fight collectively for health, for the health sector reform that we need, for the legal sector reform, the judicial reform that I was speaking about. We believe a lot of politics has been done, and we need to accept the call for delivering on specific necessities in our social aspects of our lives. There's been too much politicking in our country that we have neglected social security for the suffering Zimbabwean. We have forgotten about social security for our elderly, for people with disability. So, as Labour Economists and African Democrats, we have our manifesto, which is called SEED, which is Sustainable Empowerment and Economic Development. Our focus is mainly on the economy, an economy that transforms the lives of workers from mere receiving of wages and salaries into shareholders in corporations that employ them. Workers must not have just pensions or retirement, but posterity that can be passed on to the 10th generation. But it's unfortunate that in Zimbabwe right now, even pensions are not enough. We've got our senior citizens getting as little as $15 pension a month. What do they do with that? And unfortunately, our constitution is silent on pensions. And we're actually working on a motion which we're going to give to one of our um, partner MPs who is in parliament to be able to move that motion on why pensioners and the rights of pensioners was left out in the constitution making process. So we believe that we are the alternative. We have never wanted to define as an opposition, because as an opposition, there's a notion that you have to oppose everything, even progressive things. So LEAD is a Pan-African party which is pro-economic development that seeks to make reparations for past wrongs and unite the country and build a nation with a common shared vision and identity. We resist racism, white supremacy, and capitalism, which is an intricate part to it. We do not believe in being dominated by the West or begging policies to the East or West and receipt of conditional aid and FDI that threaten our sovereignty. If ever foreign investment is to come, it has to be welcomed from our position of strength and not of weakness or begging. We believe in local direct investment. We've got a lot of Zimbabweans that can actually invest in our mineral resources, in anything in our country, but are not being given the chance because our government is corrupt to a certain level and we do not even know what they are trading with the foreign direct investment deals that they are making. Lead has the courage to be different. It might seem to be a mammoth task to bring forth a new political culture in Zimbabwe, but we are committed to ensuring that Zimbabwe moves out of the culture of politics of patronage, politics of personalities and populism, and moves into issue-based politics that will transform Zimbabwe in our quest to ensure sustainable human development and sustainable economic growth. It's not an easy walk in the park. It was never said to be easy, but we will fight until we realize the Zimbabwe that we envision. And I, for one, do not mind going in a direction that has got a vision, that has got a strategy alone, until everyone else realizes that strategy. One of the biggest crises we have had as a nation is following everything blindly just because kune chaunga ndo kune vanhu vakawanda without asking questions. Sometimes even when we see that we're being misled, I would rather stand by the truth, stand by a path that is constitutional, that ensures constitutionalism, because I believe that there's no way I, as a political leader, will be able to abide to the national constitution of Zimbabwe when I cannot even abide to a party constitution of a party that I will be leading. Thank you.
You talked about food sovereignty. Would you like to take us through what it means and what you're talking about, how it can be achieved? It sounds like a very interesting concept.
Okay. Earlier on, I think I touched on food sovereignty and why it is important. Like I said, the food sector in Zimbabwe right now, it's in the hands of the Greeks. I will not even try to hide it. It's in the hands of Z Chronokos. He owns National Foods. He owns Colcom. He owns Texas Rangers. He owns Ivins. He owns Simbisa Brands. Almost everything that is producing food right now is owned by Z Chronokos. And what are we owning as Zimbabweans? Let me play the devil's advocate here. If he wakes up one morning and has just got an idea that black people are pissing him off, he can just poison one bakery of bread and we can have a quarter of the population gone. And that is a reality. We need to be able to secure the food processing sector in our country as native Zimbabweans. What does food sovereignty mean? Food sovereignty is more than food security, it's about control. It means Zimbabweans should own the means of food production, determining what we grow, how we grow it, ensuring it benefits our people first. And right now, we are not in control of what we grow, how we grow it, how we eat it, and how it gets into our stomachs. And that is the reality. In Zimbabwe, our agriculture has been hijacked by profit-driven policies, seed monopolies, and external influences. Our farmers are sidelined, our indigenous knowledge systems ignored, our markets flooded with imported food while local produce rots. We believe that food sovereignty is a cornerstone of national sovereignty. A hungry nation is a colonized nation. We must protect our seed systems, support agroecology, invest in smallholder farmers, and stop depending on donor aid that comes with strings attached. So, this is something that we are working on to ensure that government comes on board, the relevant ministries and stakeholders come on board. We need to sit at the table and ensure that we just stop talking about food security, yet we do not even have food sovereignty. This is an issue that people have to start talking about, conversing about, to ensure that we take charge and control of how food is produced and processed in our own country. Because one day we are going to wake up and discover that we subcontracted our health to people who do not care about us at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting. That's so very interesting. Then I want to go back to your political career as a woman. We've seen that on social media, you do get a lot of attacks. I'm not sure if you're doing having these attacks on the streets. Can you tell us now, in the eyes of a politician who's a woman, what goes on, and how do these messages, do these insults, and does everything affect you as an individual?
Maybe I need to remind you, my dear, that social media is not a real place. It's a virtual place. And I think I am one of those very few people who does not get affected by people who are hiding behind keyboards and thinking that they've made it in life because they've managed to sound Linda. Sometimes I even laugh because you can even feel the hate or the passion of the words, and they think that they will actually sting me. I'm not bothered. I've gone through worse in my life. I've gone through a lot that mere words do not move me, neither do they shake me. And I've actually come to the realization that most of these people who pride themselves in insulting people are actually broken people. They're people going through a lot in their own personal lives. They can't even deal with their own issues. And the moment they think that a character A or character B is not speaking to what they want to come in and throw insults. I'm not moved by that. How I've navigated political spaces as a woman has been an incredible journey for me. It has been a journey of realizing that there are a lot of myths against women leadership. There are also a lot of truths and realities that have to be faced. And being a female politician in Zimbabwe and Africa at large is actually an act of defiance because patriarchal dominance is real, misogyny is real, especially if you're opinionated and pragmatic like I am, because there are people who think that you should speak what they only want to hear and that you do not have to have a mind of your own. I've had a lot of people here on X saying, I am not Chaunga, I am Linda. I will speak to what I think is right and what will save our nation and what will save our people, not what Chaunga wants, because I am not Chaunga, I am Linda. The political space is often hostile, deeply patriarchal, and dismissive of assertive women. You're expected to be submissive or play second fiddle. I will not submit to a male politician like me who's on equal footing with me, not me. The only person I could submit to is my husband. I will never play second fiddle to another politician who's got a mind like me and who also wants to build his political career. Never expect that from me. When you speak boldly as a woman, you're labeled too emotional, angry, or even dangerous. But we've seen a lot of male politicians showing their emotions, being angry, and most of the wars that the world is seeing right now are actually orchestrated by male leaders. And that is very dangerous. But we never hear anyone saying Putin is too dangerous or or Netanyahu is dangerous or emotional or angry. But if they were women were presiding over these wars, I think we could have had it from here to there. Social media has been both a blessing and a curse. It gives us visibility, but also exposes us to abuse. Even though I have made peace with the abuse, because I've realized that you can never change those who think that they've got a legitimate right to abuse you for having or exercising your freedom of conscience, freedom of association, or freedom of speech. But how I've dealt with being trolled, being slut shamed and threatened simply for daring to lead, these days I block. And so far I've blocked more than 5,000 people. I've also seen how digital platforms empower women to mobilize and challenge oppression. And I think it has done wonders for me. We're doing wonderfully magnificent things as women and for women in Zimbabwe. We even have a cooperative that is called Women Grassroots Business Collective, which I lead, which actually fits into the company that I run, which is called Shisha Natural Dried Foods. This all I did using digital platforms. So it is actually a blessing to me as well. So at the end of the day, I think I've been vilified a lot in social media and print press. But instead of being broken, all these experiences became my fuel. I've emerged stronger, more determined to disrupt the political status quo and inspire other women to rise. Because if we do not show strength in our adversity, then there's nothing that we're doing. We have to keep on inspiring other women that we can do this. We can actually rise to the top against all the odds. We can do this.
Oh, thank you. Wow, thank you. Do you see yourself like partnering with other political parties, or you going your way without partnering with other political parties? And are you having plans for 2028?
I started planning for 2028 last year, so I already have plans. And secondly, partnering, coalitions, alliance building are done on ideology grounds. That is what I believe. If we do not agree on certain fundamentals which are non-negotiable to lead as a political party, then there will be no alliance building, there'll be no coalition, and there'll be no partnering. We do not compromise on constitutionalism. We do not compromise on gender equality. We do not compromise on electoral reforms and economic reforms. And we are clear and sincere about that. On those three aspects, if we cannot agree, there'll be no coalition, there'll be no alliance, and there'll be no partnering. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's now time. I'm going to be taking some questions from the speakers. So we're going to start off with ABM. Can you give your question to Linda?
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, Linda. Thank you very much for affording us your time. Before I go any further, I'll just like to say I'm very proud of what you're doing. You're an inspiration to my little sisters for your strength in the public works, and keep on doing what you're doing and presenting mature politics into Zimbabwe. We love that very much. Um, so I heard you talk about how you have some coalitions that fight for policy making in Zimbabwe and all of that. My concern is more about the drug issue that is going on in Zimbabwe. We have seen that our youth and the average age of Zimbabweans is 18 years old, right? So this can be somewhat detrimental. Um, have you seen anything, or are you doing anything in terms of trying to mitigate this issue of drugs that are probably coming over from South Africa, from what I hear? Can you just comment on that situation, because that is a source of concern for myself, as I have little brothers, I have my cousins, and everything that are still in Zimbabwe. So I was just wondering if there's any effort towards fighting this whole drug abuse, because I feel like it's only going to get worse as time goes on, if we don't cut it, nip it in the bud. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I have actually put in papers. I'm registering Linda Masarira Foundation that has got an agenda of setting up 10 clinical drug rehabilitation centers across Zimbabwe. And I've also been engaging with a lot of Zimbabweans in the diaspora who also want to assist in this program, because we realize that the drug rehabilitation centers we have in Zimbabwe are very few, and the government has been using the mental institutions, which was now also affecting mental health patients, because most of them are now full with drug addicts. And it is work in progress. And I'm also working with other drug civic society companies, I mean organizations, anti-drugs civic society organizations, to find ways on how to also assist in ensuring that we curb the drug cycle rings. I think if you read the press, you notice that I've actually gotten a number of drug peddlers arrested, and most of the times I have to follow up the cases and actually sit in the courts to ensure that justice has been done. Because most of these people work with the police as well, and at times it is very hard to get them arrested because they would have it paid the police officers, and sometimes they ignore. And the last time we had to effect a citizen's arrest, that was last month, if I'm not wrong. I'll look for the link of the story for you. And then sometimes when they get to the courts as well, they pay their way out, and you find them back on the streets selling these drugs to students and everything else. When you speak about drug addiction, it's actually something that is close to my heart, because I've been fighting drug addiction with my son. My son has been addicted to drugs since around 2017, 2018, and it's been a long journey. I understand that path, how frustrating it can be, how emotionally detaching it is, and a lot of people don't understand how bad it is, especially when it's your own child who's hooked up to these things. And sometimes you are forced to fight with all your might to ensure that no other children, no other child and children should go through this. And I've always asked God why it had to be my son. And by the times I would say, whose son did I want this to happen to? Maybe it happened to my son for me to be able to take sincere action in ensuring that we stop this menace, we stop this vice, because drug addiction is now more of a cancer. It's becoming more impossible to cure it, because we also have the security sector with their claws inside it, also peddling these drugs, also having them in the society, destroying our children. So we've got government also running their anti-drug committees and everything, and I've always challenged the way that they're doing it, that it's a bit too cosmetic. But there's a lot of sincerity that is needed for us to be able to curb drug use, to ensure that we rehabilitate totally the person who has been hooked onto drugs. And my idea of the drug rehabilitation centers I was speaking about were drug rehabilitation centers that offer the clinical therapy, drains out the drugs from the people, takes them through counseling sessions, and then afterwards, we just don't want to take them back into society without giving them something to do. So we also want to train these people, build a vocational training center. Those who want to go into farming are trained into farming, want to do metal work, want to do wood work and everything. And then eventually, if we get banks to partner, we give them loans and reintegrate them into society as wholesome people. Because most of the times after rehabilitation, I've noticed with other children that I've seen who came out of rehabilitation, they go back, they've got nothing to do, they're idle, they go back into society, they meet their friends who didn't go through the rehabilitation process. 6, 7 months later, they're back onto drugs. So it's a cycle. Once one person comes out of rehabilitation, they need to be kept occupied. They need to be removed from those social cycles that they had for them to be able to thrive and go on with their lives. So I believe that a lot more needs to be done in terms of policy, in terms of also ensuring that we protect our young people, our youth from drug and substance abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We'll go to Marcy. Then after Marcy, we'll have Otsit. Please feel free to request for the mic if you've got any questions to Linda Masarira.
Hey, child of God, one did drag up from another space in the Kawea panel, so I missed a large chunk of Linda's submission, and I'm sad I did that because it's important. Topic: women in politics, food sovereignty with Linda. So I've got a lot of questions to ask Linda. Let me start with the women in politics. There was a time I won't say it's a threat. I can't remember what the subject was, and I responded to you, and your response was, "These are the gatekeepers of patriarchy." I found that answer very dismissive, very convenient. It's the new insult to women with conflicting ideas when they butt heads. When women have a debate, the labeling the other woman a pandara to patriarchy. So I wanted to ask you, women in politics, how do you situate them? Are they out of context to their culture, their religion, their spirituality, and the social context? I just want to understand what women in politics embody to you, so that I can understand the gatekeepers. Who are the gatekeepers of patriarchy? And maybe I should have first said what I am. I am a Nego feminist. I'm a feminist who believes in negotiations, um, placing themselves in the African context, more specifically valuing womanhood, motherhood, and your place in society, not outside of context to the African spiritual, traditional, and societal values. So, how do you situate women in politics? Take out the men, just the women themselves in Zimbabwean politics right now.
Excuse me, can I cough a bit? I didn't mean to laugh, Mercy, but I will reiterate and say that the majority of women in Zimbabwe are patriarchal gatekeepers. I will not mince my words on that. I can give you an example of one day we're coming out of Constitutional Court with Dr. Togozadi Kupe, and we had our sisters that we had left the other side. And they were in the front leading song, calling us Hure, Hure, pointing us. And I'm speaking of MPs who are women. We were saying that. Would you disagree with me that that is patriarchal gatekeeping? How can you sing Hure, Hure to your own sister just because she's got a different political ideology? Isn't that patriarchal gatekeeping? Can you answer me, please, so that I can go ahead?
Um, I reserve to say, because I believe women can also be vile like men. I believe women can be insulting like men. I believe women can also use political divisive language like men. I believe women can be expedient like men. And they're convenient and expedient.
Beautiful, so that I can continue. The main reason why I said most women are patriarchal gatekeepers is women have failed to differentiate between politics and being a wife. When you're a wife in your own home, you can submit to your husband and do everything womanly that is expected of you in your marriage. But the moment I am there as a political leader, and we've got very few women, and we are trying to ensure that Section 17 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which speaks to gender equality, becomes a reality. We start saying, because this one is not subscribing to A, B, C, D, and E, because that's a male figure. That one has been ordained. People are supposed to be following that, and they start criticizing you. They start being vile. They start being everything. We start then having all those other issues. I am one of the very few women in the political economy in Zimbabwe who has tried to stand by women across the political divide, fight for their rights, fight for their space, and ensure that they are treated with respect and dignity. I have never chosen which woman to stand for or not to stand for. But women have always chose not to stand with me because they want to please their patriarchal leaders. And that's a fact. Secondly, we also did a dissertation survey for some colleagues that came from the University of, was it Cape Town or Pretoria? I'm not sure, 2 years ago. We did it in the high density areas of Harare and some peri-urban areas. They had 3 questions that they asked. Would you work for a woman? Would you vote for a woman MP? Would you vote for a woman president? Most of the women that were interviewed answered no. And half of the men we interviewed said yes, the rest were no. So there is something that is already ingrained in the majority of women that will make them protect the patriarch. It is in them, and it is part of their socialization. And they've not yet come to a level that they understand that women can also lead. They can also lead in political structures and also run their houses as wives and mothers. Women in our country, most women rather, are socialized to be meek, to be submissive, and not to question things. They are socialized to be led by the male in quotes. They grow up in a house with a father, and most of them are not even allowed to leave the house and go and live on their own until they get married, where they are handed over from the father to their husband who will lead them. Most of those who then leave home without being married attract certain labels and names to them. So the patriarchal gatekeeping to most can be subconscious and not consciously, because they are wired to think in that particular manner. We all grew up in a patriarchal society, and naturally, most of us are inclined to protect the patriarchy. And that is the reality. So there is no insult in my sentiment of saying most women are patriarchal gatekeepers in the body politic of Zimbabwe, because that is the reality, because I exist in it. I work in it. I live it, breathe it, and sleep it. Thank you, Mercy.
Okay, I just wanted to make a clarity that it is a power-related issue rather than an insulting thing, because it gets banded around. Patriarchy is about power. So you made it clear. It is those who stand.
Marcy, you are the one who said it's an insult, not me.
No.
You
I
said
said
when you spoke about.
no. Saying your answer is correct. You answered me, so I had clarity. So that's what I mean. That
Thank
now
you.
I am clear in my head that when you use that reference, it is not from the insult that the word has now often been used for, but it is a power issue, because when we are dealing with patriarchy, we are dealing with power. So it's the women who stand in the gap, preventing, being a bottleneck to power or protective of the existing power. Because the word has now, when two women fight, The other is just labeled a gatekeeper of patriarchy, even if the context has nothing to do with the preservation of power or the prevention of others to power. That's what I was saying. That's why I asked you, clarify for me in your context what that word was. So you clarify.
Noted, Basi, noted, my sister.
Thank you. Now we'll have hot seat, then Auntie Tears afterwards.
Thank you very much. Sissy Linda, how are you? I always love having you and hearing you speak, and love you deeply and appreciate everything that you're doing and fighting for women. I want to ask about 2028. Is LEAD going to participate whether there are electoral reforms or not? And are you making any efforts to make sure that they're there? Or is it any worth participating if there are no electoral reforms? And are you also going to, if try and get MPs and councillors, some people, to also compete in that election as well? Thank you.
Irodo, thank you so much for your question. Labour Economists and African Democrats wants to participate in 2028 elections. We have already started tabling the electoral reforms that we're demanding. And I think you also have to understand the fact that Zimbabwe's electoral political economy is not fair. It's not even. We have demands that we need to be put in place before we go to 2028 elections. And if some of them are not met, there'll be no point into going into an election that is already won, that is already unfair, that is already compromised. Issue that has not been rectified. Secondly, the issue to do with the voters' roll is a very contentious issue, and that is where most of the time the plot. Thirdly, there's another issue to do with funding of elections. All other political parties except the ruling party always have their accounts being snooped at. They're watched where they're getting the money, and at times they even lose that money. But we have the ruling party getting money from China, any other country, any other donor, but it's the opposition. You're told you cannot get money from anyone who's not a Zimbabwean who's outside our borders. There's no fairness in how to get electoral funding, and there's always the manipulation of the security sector against those in the opposition. So there are a lot of things that need reform for us to be able to say we can actually get into this election and participate. I'll draw you back to 2023 elections, where I had a similar issue with President Valerio. We both took our cases to court. President Valerio's case went in before mine, and she was allowed to then effect the payments after the nomination date in local currency. My case stalled and dragged for a further 2 weeks until the court was out of time. We just got a judgment that was read one line, and we could not appeal because they also dragged to give us the judgment. We also want our judicial system to reform and stop using lawfare against political opponents. Because at times there is no point in using a lot of resources getting into compromised elections. But our wish and our desire is that by the time we get to 2028, all of the issues that we have that we need to be resolved will be done. And we are actually in the process of partnering with like-minded opposition parties to be able to speak with one voice and to advocate for the electoral reforms that we need with one voice, and to at least have an election that is uncontested in 2028, where the electoral playing field is at least a bit even, because we know that there's no electoral playing field that is totally even across the world. But we need to have at least that picture of a free and fair election where everyone is going into an election at equal footing. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Can we have Auntie Diaz? Then Marcy's got a hand up. Then you can have Marcy coming after Auntie Diaz's question has been answered.
Oh, thank you, child of Zimbabwe. My question to Linda is feminism. Are you a feminist yourself? Does it have a role in our society? Would you say Zimbabwe is a society where women are oppressed? And yeah, maybe what is your view of feminism in the Zimbabwean context?
You know, trying to define feminism is very subjective and relative because a lot of people have got different versions of what they call a feminist. But I will take you back into history. Way before colonization, a woman was a very revered person in our African context. That is why airipwa, aibvisirwa pfuma, uye hakuna dare raigarwa pasina madzitete. And hakuna hondo yaenda kunorwiwa madzitete vasati vabvuma kuti kuri kuendwa kuhondo. So all that was eroded by colonization. And kukasara kune an illusion of women being second class, not being worthy to lead. But when you also look at it, there's an issue that I've been speaking about the past 2 years of why there's never been any documentation of women who commanded troops during the Second Chimurenga War. They were there, and I know some of them have sat down with them, and I'm still convincing them to write books. It's because there's a systematic exclusion of women in leadership. In the Zimbabwean context, I think we understand a feminist as someone who actively advocates for the political, economic, cultural, and social equality of women and men, while also working to dismantle the patriarchal systems that perpetuate gender-based oppression and injustice within the Zimbabwean society. But there's always been resistance because people cannot differentiate between a married couple and a woman in society. A woman is still expected to submit even in the boardroom, where you'll find other board members sitting down and expecting another board member who's a woman to prepare tea for them and serve them. Yet they are all board members. And this is the reality of some of the things that happens in the boardrooms. You'll find in a standing committee meeting other people expecting another standing committee member who is a woman to serve the other ones who are male. Why do you want to be served? I'm not your wife. We are all political leaders. But one thing that I've understood and loved about us Zimbabwean women is we have refused to define feminism in Western-centric feminist ideologies that do not account for our own African realities. As Zimbabwean feminists, we have often emphasized our African-centered feminism, and we have actually been deliberating on Pan-African feminism or Afri-feminism, which recognizes the intersectionality of colonial legacies, class, race in shaping women's oppression. Yes, oppression is very real in our country, and we remain advocating for women's rights and equality. So yes, I define as a feminist in Zimbabwe, was fighting for gender equality, was fighting for protection against child marriages, domestic violence, and sexual abuse, was advocating for reproductive health rights and access to menstrual dignity, maternal health dignity, equal political participation. And we're doing a lot of community-based activism We are organizing women on the grassroots. We're doing skills development, economic empowerment projects to ensure that women also have their own means of production, they're financially independent, and that they can also take care of the family when their husbands pass on. So I believe that in as much as we are trying to resist patriarchy and cultural oppression, us and feminists in Zimbabwe are challenging harmful traditions such as the commodification of women by very high lobola prices that are unreasonable. We have also been fighting inheritance laws that exclude daughters, and we succeeded. We are also fighting against societal norms that normalize male dominance. We believe in equality, and when we build an equal and just society, we would have it one as Zimbabwean feminists and with our own defined type of feminism that relates to us as Zimbabwean feminists. Thank you.
Yeah, Linda. Maybe if you can define that Afro-feminism that you've spoken to, and what do you see as the role women have played in the degradation of their role from once being revered to their status in society now? Because I see a problem. Women do not want to take accountability. If a woman is attacked, if the attack is ad hominem, she's going to spin it around and say it's feminism, it's patriarchal. But if your character is warped and people call you out, that has got nothing to do with patriarchy. We see our women. You are the ones that are there on social spaces with Tatelicious and Mama V and all that. There has been a shift, even in character. Women as we know them back then. So we have to consider those nuances as well. And for women and feminists, if you are taking an Afrocentric approach, I think it will be fair to fix your camp as well. So that's the only way we can go back to that time when women were revered. Because you cannot revere someone who's acting like that. There has been a problem, and it's a big social problem in our communities, even in the diaspora and back home. The family unit. What role are feminists playing to reconstruct the family unit? Because it has disintegrated, and mostly it's because of respect. From where I see it, the respect is lacking in families. The woman doesn't respect the husband. Children don't learn respect. No one is there now to guide the children, and we've got all sorts of problems: drugs, divorce, and all sorts of problems. I don't know, what do you think feminists can play a role in all that?
I think when you asked your first question, I spoke to you about how we're still discussing about adopting Afrofeminism, which is feminism rooted in the lived experiences, histories, and struggles of Black African women, both on the continent and in the diaspora. We want to center more on African identity, our culture, our context, in our fight against patriarchy. But we're not saying as we fight patriarchy, we don't want our men around. We want them there. A family cannot be a family without the man, without the father. We can not be mothers without the father, without the man. We cannot be mothers to daughters only. Thus, our feminism should be rooted in ensuring that the marriage institution does not diminish and that we try and uphold our Africanness that made us so unique since time immemorial. So it is important for us to be able to ensure that we do not watch over the disintegration of the marriage concept, of the family unit. It is unfortunate that most people think that being a feminist means that you should hate men, You should not collaborate with men. You should challenge men. No, 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 no. That is not feminism. Afrofeminism understands that African women face multiple overlapping forms of oppression, not just sexism, but also racism, neocolonialism, poverty, cultural erasure. And we also have to ensure that we gravitate towards reclaiming our culture and moving towards a culture revolution. Unlike Western feminism, which often centers white middle class women, Afrofeminism insists that race, history, and global power dynamics cannot be ignored. We need to reclaim African women's voices, philosophies, and resistance movements that existed way long before colonialism. So I agree with you that there's a certain element of respect that is lacking in marriage. But I also believe that respect is two-way. People have to learn to respect each other. And when both parties respect each other, their children will also grow up respecting their parents because they are showing that they also respect each other. So to have that reverence back, it all starts with how us, the women, are going to raise the male child. Because the male child of today who's being raised in Zimbabwe has got no respect for women. And it is a shame and it is very sad. The girl child is vilified on the streets. And just recently, a grade 7 student was raped in a combi at Copacabana. What is that? You cannot even move freely in your preferred clothes in the streets of Harare because men will gag you, whistle at you, and do all sorts. Women are harassed at bus ranks. Women are harassed in marriages. Girls are being forced to sleep with lecturers in university institutions for them to pass. Sometimes it feels like it's even a curse to be born a girl child. There's a lot that we need to fight for collectively as women in terms of protection of the girl child, protection of the young women, because they go through a lot. Some cannot even get a job without going through a carpet interview. And these are the things that we're fighting for as Zimbabwean feminists. We are fighting for the dignity of the girl child. We're fighting for the dignity of the woman that was long lost. And instead of men trying to fight us for standing to protect their daughters, they should actually join us in this fight. There is no point in us trying to say we do not support feminists because you don't know our stories. Take time to understand where we are coming from, why we are doing what we are doing. What are the young girls going through? You, I'm sorry to say this, but I have to say now, my brothers, you have left a trail of broken young women because you pretend to love them, use them, abuse them, leave
But
some of them
do you as
pregnant,
women take
some of them
accountability
broken.
at all?
Wait, can I finish
Auntie
off?
Diaz,
Can I
please,
finish
can you
off?
not disturb any speaker while they're speaking? It's not a back and forth. She's responding. Allow her to respond. We want to hear her response in full. Thank you.
This trail of broken women is now a menace to the society. And sometimes when you then get into a relationship with someone who's already broken, it is unfortunate that you can then become the cannon fodder on where she will release everything that she has gone through in the past. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I've always been encouraging a lot of young women to go for counseling to be able to heal from the past pain. Because sometimes when you carry pain from one relationship to the next, it creates a broken cycle of relationships. So people are different. People react to things differently. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to ensure that we repair the broken social fabric in our society. We knit together the society into a loving society that can breed love and ensure a love revolution. Thank you.
Are you going to talk to accountability? Do you see yourselves as responsible for your circumstances now? Do you see anything wrong in what women are doing, particularly those that align with feminism?
Your question is vague. It's very vague because I think I defined what feminism is. And I defined that there are some women who do not understand what feminism is, who think that feminism is about hating men. And I said feminism is not about hating men, but about finding common ground to be able to eliminate the systemic elbowing out of women in many spaces in our social, political, economic, religious lives, etc., etc. So I do not understand what your question is, or whether you did not understand my explanation, because
No.
I think I've been clear
Can I repeat?
about Afrofeminism.
Can I rephrase my question maybe?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll rephrase it like that. What you are saying, we're calling the girl child today, is it the quintessential girl child that we want in our society as Zimbabwean? Is it reflective of culture, or we've moved away from that? Do you see a problem in the way our women are handling themselves in our society today? Does it align with our cultural values? If not, do you take accountability or responsibility for some of this as women? And what do you think can be done to restore that position?
From where I come from, I think we are trying to mold the girl child not to be taken away or to be swayed by the social media drama, and that the virtual place is not real. It is unfortunate that some people have become so obsessed with social media that they think that what happens in social media is real, and some have ended up being very broken people. But in terms of culture, on the ground in Zimbabwe, I have been witnessing a cultural revolution. People are not as vile as some people pose on social media. So I think we should start by differentiating the real world and the social media world, because those are two very different and complex places. People are still getting married, sustaining their marriages on the ground, and women are still respecting their husbands, and this is happening. Those who are not need to be taught on how to nurture their houses, how to behave in their marriages. So we cannot just start stereotyping every woman because we saw 5 women while behaving badly. No, 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 no. We cannot stereotype all women into one card box. It will not work like that. Can you still hear me, or I'm lost? I don't know what's happening here.
I couldn't hear you.
But I had responded. I hope you heard my response.
Sorry, I think I'd lost my connection.
Oh, sorry,
Can you
we
hear
had
me?
lost you. I thought it was me. So we all jumped out to come back.
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you now. We lost you just a little bit. Are you still there, Linda?
Is there anyone talking? Yes, I'm here. I'm waiting for questions, or I can go and sleep.
No, 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 no. It's just that the topics are. Next time we should get you with one topic, then to attack Karira. But you know what? This will make a decision for me whether I join your party or not. And I hope I will make it make sense, because it doesn't make sense. hopefully you have enough patience to make it make sense. I am anti-girl child. That whole coined mantra. I'm not against women's rights. I'm not against equity for girls, equality, and addressing historical, cultural, traditional, systemic, all those issues. I'm not against. I think a lot of work needs to be done for the females in our society, but I'm against girl child, and I'll explain why. Girl child has been evaluated in the Western world, and it was dumped into the African continent as an experiment. The idea of separating children, understand, I'm not saying women, I'm saying children. It was specifically designed for children, and a lot of help was plowed onto the girl child to experiment if the prospects of the girl child were improved, what would be the outcome. The outcomes were seen, and I think the biggest experiments were in Kenya, Uganda, and Sierra Leone. When that was done, it created a disparity between the boys and the girls. Whilst it did address some systemic issues that had been lingering from the past, it actually dropped the prospect of the boys, because now the caveat, in a country that is already plagued with the economic problems, and a family unit has all its children affected, if you improve access on a
Hello,
gender,
can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you. Oh, all right, can you hear me? I see APM. Right, so the experiment said that in countries where the economics of that country are unequal for everybody, in a family setup, the disparities don't only go to the girl, they go to all the children, irrespective of gender. But if you have an outside element that improves access for a gender, the other gender, which is boys in this case, will continue to experience the deprivation, inequality to access and opportunities based on their economic variance. So they didn't adopt girl child in the Western world. They adopted every child matters. That is not to say equity will not be addressed, but the recognition was from a family setup. If a family is in low income and the decision for kids' school fees, in most African countries, all those kids will have problems in education. If it's healthcare, all those children will have disparities in healthcare. So I am looking for a political party that will recognize that children in countries where the economic prospects, I'm not talking about the others, they also play their part. You were right in saying there's intersectionality in issues, but the continuing of girl child mantras in Africa have also drawn unintended consequences. This is now when the reliance to NGOs, partner organizations, agenda driven movements from outside have now used access to resources under the girl child movement, and they have actually created a bigger disparity between the boys and girls. Remember, I'm not considering men. I've got a different argument as well. The infantilizing of women to children using the girl child mantra, where now we can have advocacy for a 35-year-old woman under the banner of girl child, trivializes the specific issues that are happening to a girl child, where women can make their cases using issues that are affecting children, such that now there's no difference between advocacy for children and advocacy for women. Even in the African context, a woman is recognized in their age span. And we perpetuate patriarchy when we constantly capture a woman in girl mode, where the woman stays a girl. Whereas in the African context, we have many names that denote our progression in society, till at the very top, we have got our grandmother, easily recognized as a matriarch. In between, women hold positions of different titles, not just girl. So, having said all this mambo jumbo, how comfortable are you if I was to be in your party and argue that the girl child movement must be abandoned for an all child matter approach that would recognize equity and address those cultural, religious, traditional, systemic, political issues for the girl child, but not abandoning the boy child? Because a woman does not only give birth to a girl, she has no choice. She gives birth to both genders. And to ask women to only have advocacy for one aspect of their children would leave the other women. If you've only got boys, what happens? Your children, who's going to advocate for those? I don't know if I made any sense. um how would you feel if I was to join and I'm a member of the party and I say we are going to go out on the street and dismantle this girl child movement? Not that we are not advocating, but the use of that word must go.
It is unfortunate that we live in a world where what we desire cannot happen because we desire for that to happen. Secondly, we also have to understand and appreciate what is happening in the grassroots before we start comparing what happened to Uganda or what's happening in the West or the East. The reality of the girl child being vulnerable in Zimbabwe is very real. There are a lot of things that are happening to the girl child, even from their own biological parents in the very same house. We still are suffering from a pandemic of child marriages in Zimbabwe, and that is very real. Children as young as 14, 15 getting married, getting raped. This is very real. Come to Zimbabwe. I want to take you to Epworth. I want you to go and see what's happening in that peri-urban area to the girl child. I'll take you to Marange. I'll take you to Malipati. I want you to see with your own eyes young girls working, young girls in the mines, vachitema matombo mahama, trying to make a living because they are not allowed to go to school. Their parents can only take the boy child to school.